throwaway account because people know my main. I'm a pediatric nurse, married to my husband with 3 kids. I recently reconnected with my sister Amber after 22 years apart, and I need some advice about our increasingly complicated financial situation. Some background. Sorry if this gets long, but context matters. When we were kids, I was 8 and Amber was 6 when we were separated. I stayed with Mom while Amber was adopted by another family. It wasn't my choice. I was just a kid. But I've carried this weird survivor's guilt my whole life about it. Last year, we reconnected through one of those DNA matching websites, and it was incredible to find each other again after so many years. My life now is stable but not luxurious. I work night shifts at the hospital, and my husband teaches high school English. We're comfortable enough to provide for our kids, but we budget carefully for everything. My husband is amazing and supportive, which I'm realizing now is even more important given this whole situation. Amber is a single mom with 2 kids and works part-time at a retail store. She has a supportive adoptive family, but she constantly mentions money struggles when we talk. I totally get that. Being a single parent is hard financially. I want to help where I can because she's my sister and we've already lost so much time together. Here's where things get complicated and why I'm feeling increasingly anxious about this whole situation. I've noticed over the past year that Amber kind of expects me to pay for things. At first, it was subtle. She'd forget her wallet when we'd meet for coffee, or she'd say something like, "Oh, I can pay you back later," but never did. I didn't mind at first because, honestly, I was just happy to have my sister back in my life. Yesterday really brought things to a head. Though, we planned to meet at the mall with all our kids, grab some lunch, and then let the kids play at the indoor playground they have there. I'd budgeted for our family's meal and the playground fees, which isn't cheap with 3 kids. When we got to the food court, Amber walked her kids over to a restaurant and told them, "You can get whatever you want today." My stomach just sank. Her kids ordered these meals with desserts and everything, and their bill alone came to $87. Meanwhile, I'd carefully chosen a more budget-friendly option for my family. When the check came, Amber sat there looking at me until I pulled out my card. She didn't even say thank you, just commented that this is what sisters do for each other. After lunch, we headed to the indoor playground, which costs $15 per kid for entry. When we got to the payment counter, Amber stepped aside and started chatting with her daughter while the cashier looked at me for payment. So I ended up dropping another $75 for all 5 kids to play. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of the children who were excited to play together, but I was feeling more and more frustrated. While the kids were playing, Amber started showing me her phone with all these expensive things she wanted to buy. She kept saying that her adoptive family doesn't understand how hard it is as a single mom. I couldn't help but notice that she had a purse and a manicure that probably cost more than what I spent on my own birthday gift to myself last month. I'm not judging her choices, but it made me wonder about her priorities when she claims to be struggling so much. The most awkward part came on the drive home. My 12-year-old asked me, "Mom, why doesn't Aunt Amber ever pay for anything?" Kids are so observant, aren't they? I was mortified, but also kind of relieved that I wasn't imagining things. I didn't know what to say, so I just mumbled something about everyone having different financial situations and changed the subject. When I got home and told my husband about everything, he pointed out a pattern I hadn't fully acknowledged. This isn't just an occasional thing. It's happened every single time we've gotten together with Amber. At restaurants, activities, even when we invited them over for a barbecue, and she came without anything while we provided all the food. He's concerned, rightfully so, about our upcoming annual family trip to Great Wolf Lodge in 3 weeks. We've been saving monthly for this trip since last year. It's our big family tradition, and the kids look forward to it all year. When Amber found out about it, she immediately hinted about joining us, and I was initially excited about including her family in our tradition. But now I'm worried she expects us to cover everything for her and her kids too. We just can't afford to add 3 more people to our budget for a multi-day resort stay. My husband suggested we need to set clear boundaries before the trip happens, but I'm terrified of confrontation and worried about damaging our newly rebuilt relationship. What if she thinks I don't care about her because I won't pay for everything? What if she disappears from my life again? I already lost her once, and the thought of losing her again makes me feel physically ill. At the same time, I can't keep emptying our family's budget like this. My husband works hard for his teacher's salary, and I pick up extra shifts when I can, but we don't have unlimited money. We have our own 3 kids to think about, and their future college funds aren't going to fill themselves, if college even remains affordable by then, but that's a whole other issue. I love my sister. I really do. I think about those missing 22 years all the time and wonder how different things might have been if we'd grown up together. I feel this obligation to make up for lost time, but I'm starting to realize that might be exactly what she's counting on. I just don't know how to approach this conversation about financial boundaries without sounding like I'm choosing money over our relationship. How do I make her understand that I want her in my life, but can't be her financial support system? I've tried subtly bringing up the topic, but she immediately starts talking about how hard her life has been since being given away, her words, and I end up feeling guilty all over again. Thanks for reading this far if you did. I'm just at a loss about how to handle this situation without destroying our newly rebuilt relationship or bankrupting my family. Any advice from people who've dealt with similar family financial dynamics would be really appreciated. I just want to find a way for us all to be family without this constant tension over who pays for what. Now for the first update. I can't believe how many people responded to my post about my sister expecting me to fund her life after our reunion. Seriously, my phone was blowing up for days. Thank you all for the advice, support, and validation. I really needed to hear I wasn't being unreasonable. After reading through hundreds of your comments, I sat down with my husband to figure out our game plan. We agreed that I needed to have a direct conversation with Amber about financial expectations for the Great Wolf Lodge trip, especially since it's coming up in just 3 weeks. This trip is a big deal for our family. We've been saving all year, and the kids talk about it for months in advance. My husband and I decided that we should still include Amber and her kids. Many of you suggested uninviting them completely, which I totally understand, but with clear boundaries. I called Amber the next evening after I got home from my shift at the hospital. I was nervous as hell, but I knew I had to do this. I tried to be as gentle as possible while still being clear. I explained that while we're excited to include her and her kids in our family tradition, each family would need to cover their own expenses: room, meals, activities. I emphasized how much it meant to us that they could join our special tradition, but also that we simply couldn't afford to cover costs for 3 additional people. To my surprise, Amber seemed totally fine with it. She agreed immediately and even thanked me for including them in such a meaningful family tradition. She said she completely understood about the financial situation and assured me she would handle her own expenses. I felt such relief after that call. I thought, maybe I was overthinking this whole thing. Being the planner I am, I spent hours researching budget options at the resort to help Amber afford the trip. I created a detailed cost breakdown, found cheaper room options on less popular floors, discovered some discount passes for the water park, and even looked into meal plan options that might save her money. I texted all this information to Amber, and she responded with heart emojis and "You're the best sister ever." I felt great about how things were going. 3 days after our conversation, my phone rang at 6 a.m. I had just finished a 12-hour night shift. For those who asked about my schedule, yes, I work 12s, usually 3 nights a week. I was exhausted after caring for sick kids all night, including a particularly rough case. All I wanted was to go to bed, but I saw it was Amber calling, which was unusual for this hour. I answered, worried something might be wrong. Amber immediately launched into how she had a small problem with the trip arrangements. She explained that after looking at the prices I sent, she realized she couldn't afford her own room, but she didn't want to cancel. Instead, she suggested that her family could share our family's suite. Her kids could sleep with my kids, and she would take the pull-out couch. Problem solved, right? When I finally found my voice, I explained that our suite is already at maximum occupancy with our family of 5. The hotel wouldn't allow 8 people in one room anyway. It's against fire code. Plus, we'd have no personal space for a 4-day vacation. That's when her tone completely changed. "I thought you wanted us to have a relationship," she said, her voice getting that edge I've come to recognize. Then came the guilt trip. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to watch you with your perfect family, knowing our mom wanted you but not me? You got to stay, and I got sent away. This is exactly what I feared would happen, and what many of you predicted in the comments. She was using our childhood separation against me, triggering all that survivor's guilt I mentioned in my first post. I've carried that weight for decades, the knowledge that I stayed while she was given away, her words. I felt physically sick as those familiar feelings of guilt washed over me. Then I heard her daughter's voice in the background asking when they were going to the water castle. Amber told me she'd already shared the news about the vacation with her kids, and they were excited about it. I could hear the little girl chattering about the slides and the wolf ears they give you when you check in. I found myself saying, "Look, I can help pay for part of your room. Maybe we can split the cost." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. Even as I said it, my mind was calculating how many extra shifts I'd need to pick up to cover this unexpected expense. Mini update before I continue. I learned from a nurse friend that our hospital offers financial counseling for employees. I've made an appointment for next week because this situation is making me realize I need better boundaries with money overall. After I got off the phone with Amber, I crawled into bed next to my already awake husband. He could tell something was wrong just by looking at my face. When I told him what happened and that I'd agreed to pay half of Amber's room, he didn't get angry like I expected. Instead, he just looked concerned and said he was worried about the pattern of manipulation and how it was affecting our family finances. He reminded me that we've been saving for this trip all year, cutting back on other expenses to make it special for the kids. I knew he was right, but I also felt trapped. How could I go back on what I'd already promised? To those who commented about my conflict avoidance tendencies, you nailed it. I just kept thinking about Amber's kids and how excited they were. It wasn't their fault their mom was putting me in this position. That evening, I received a text from our mutual cousin that Amber had bought expensive concert tickets for herself and a friend. Tickets purchased just one day after she called me, claiming she couldn't afford her portion of the trip. These were for a major artist that cost hundreds of dollars. I sat staring at my phone for a long time. While I was calculating extra night shifts to cover her expenses, she was buying concert tickets. Many of you warned me in the comments that this wasn't about genuine financial need, and you were absolutely right. I'm still processing all of this. The trip is still 2 weeks away, and I'm torn about what to do next. My cultural background places huge importance on supporting family, especially siblings separated through no fault of their own. But I'm also beginning to understand that there's a difference between supporting family and being taken advantage of. My husband thinks I should call Amber back and tell her I can't help with her room after all, but I'm worried about the fallout. She's already told her kids about the trip. I don't want to disappoint those innocent children because their mother is being manipulative. At the same time, I can't keep stretching our budget thin and picking up extra shifts that keep me away from my own kids. To answer the most common questions from my previous post. 1. No, Amber's adoptive family isn't wealthy, but they are stable middle class and have helped her financially in the past. 2. Yes, I've tried bringing up finances in subtle ways before, but this was my first direct conversation about it. 3. My husband has been amazingly patient, but is reaching his limit with the situation. The more I think about it, the more I realize this isn't just about money. It's about respect and boundaries. If Amber truly couldn't afford the trip, I'd be happy to help within reason. It's the pattern of manipulation and entitlement that's making me question everything. As some commenters pointed out, she seems to view me less as a sister and more as a source of funding. I'm still figuring out exactly how to handle this situation with the Great Wolf Lodge trip just around the corner, but I feel less lost than before, thanks to all your insights and advice. Anyone been in a similar situation with a manipulative family member? What boundaries worked for you without completely destroying the relationship? Now for the second update. Hey everyone, thanks for all your messages asking for an update on the situation with my sister. Still can't believe how many of you reached out. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and as you probably guessed, things haven't exactly improved with Amber. In case you missed my previous posts about my sister expecting me to fund her life after our reunion, here's a quick recap. Amber and I were separated as kids. I stayed with our mom while she was adopted. We reconnected last year, and now she constantly expects me to pay for everything. My last update was about how she initially agreed to pay her own way for our family's Great Wolf Lodge trip, then claimed she couldn't afford her room guilted me into paying half, and then I found out she'd bought expensive concert tickets right after claiming poverty to me. Link to original post and first update for those who missed it. So here's what's happened since then. I've picked up 3 extra night shifts at the pediatric unit to cover the additional costs for Amber's room. If you've never worked hospital night shifts, let me tell you, they're brutal. I've been coming home at 8 a.m. completely exhausted, trying to sleep while the house is active, and barely seeing my own kids. My husband has been amazing handling everything, but I can tell he's reaching his limit with this whole situation. Last night after my shift, he showed me Amber's Instagram stories from the past week. I rarely check social media because of my schedule. She was posting while I'm working extra shifts to cover her financial hardship for this trip. I sat there scrolling through her posts, feeling like such an idiot. My husband didn't even need to say, "I told you so." His face said it all. We've been cutting back on our own expenses for months to save for this special family vacation. And here I am picking up extra shifts to subsidize someone who's clearly not struggling as much as she claims. The frustrating part is that my cultural background makes this so complicated. In my family, we're Filipino American, there's this concept of utang na loob, a debt of gratitude that creates lifelong obligations, especially to family. The fact that I stayed with our mom while Amber was adopted out has always given me this sense that I owe her something. Many commenters on my last post pointed out this was classic survivor's guilt, and you were right. Yesterday was supposed to be the day we finalized all the resort reservations. Just when I thought everything was settled, I got a text from Amber asking if I could also cover the water park passes for her family, since they're probably cheaper when purchased together. We're talking about almost $200 more on top of everything else I'd already agreed to pay. After talking with my husband, I decided to call her rather than text back. I needed to have a real conversation about expectations before we got to the resort. When she answered, she immediately launched into this story about how her daughter couldn't go on a school field trip last week because she couldn't afford the $30 fee. I tried to steer the conversation to the water park passes, explaining as gently as possible that adding another $200 to what I was already covering wasn't something I'd budgeted for. I didn't even finish my sentence before her tone completely changed. Do you know how difficult it is to watch your biological sister live a better life while you were given away like unwanted property? She asked. I tried to explain that I work hard for what I have, that I'm taking extra shifts away from my own family to help with this trip, but she cut me off. She said I had no idea what it was like growing up, knowing your real mother kept one child, but got rid of you, and the least I could do was help give her kids some happiness. I wish I could say I stood my ground, but I mostly sat there taking it. When I finally managed to suggest that maybe we needed to reconsider if this trip was a good idea right now, she accused me of acting like those wealthy families who adopt kids just for show. That one really hurt, especially given our background. The call ended with her saying she'd just have to tell her children they couldn't go to the water park while their cousins enjoyed themselves, and that they'll understand it's because their aunt doesn't really consider them family. Then she hung up on me. Nice touch, right? I went straight to the bathroom and just broke down. After a few minutes, I heard a knock on the door. My 12-year-old was standing there looking so concerned. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. That just made me cry harder. This situation isn't just affecting me anymore. It's impacting my whole family. Before anyone asks, yes, my kids have been excited about bringing their cousins on this trip. They've only known them for less than a year, but they've bonded quickly, especially the older ones. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, my husband suggested we should reconsider inviting Amber altogether. He pointed out that our own children's vacation experience would be affected by the obvious tension. He wasn't angry, just concerned about the pattern we're enabling and how it's affecting our family dynamics and financial stability. The rational part of me knows he's right. This isn't just about money, it's about respect and emotional manipulation. But there's still this voice in my head saying she's my only sister, and if I set boundaries, I might lose her completely. I keep thinking about her kids who are innocent in all this and genuinely excited about the trip. Edit 10:30 a.m. Just to clarify, since some comments asked, yes, Amber knows I've been picking up extra shifts to cover her expenses. I mentioned it during our call, thinking it might help her understand the sacrifice involved. Her response was something like, "At least you have that option," since her job apparently doesn't offer overtime. I spent all night researching emotional manipulation tactics and found this article about guilt tripping that described Amber's behavior almost exactly. I've been reading about setting boundaries with family members who use childhood trauma as leverage, and logically, I understand what I need to do. But emotionally, I'm completely torn. The Great Wolf Lodge trip is still scheduled for next weekend. My husband says whatever I decide, he'll support me, but I can tell he's worried about my well-being. I've lost 5 pounds in the last 2 weeks from stress, and my sleep schedule is completely wrecked from the extra shifts. I called the resort this morning to ask about their cancellation policy. The woman on the phone was really kind when I briefly explained the situation. She offered to put a note on our reservation that only charges to my room can go on my card. I hadn't even thought about the possibility that Amber might try to charge things to our room. Thank goodness for kind customer service people. The cultural pressure is immense, though. I tried talking to my mom about the situation, hoping for some support in setting boundaries, but she just said, "She's your sister. Family helps family." Not helpful, Mom. I'm starting to realize that the relationship I hope to build with my sister might not be possible if it's founded on financial transactions rather than genuine connection. What hurts the most is wondering if she even wants a relationship with me beyond what I can provide materially. Would she still want to be in my life if I stop paying for things? I've been rereading your comments from my previous posts, especially those from people who've dealt with similar family dynamics. A lot of you suggested therapy, and I'm finally going to take that advice. I found a therapist who specializes in family trauma and has experience with cross-cultural issues. My first appointment is tomorrow. Why did I wait so long to do this? I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do about the trip. Part of me wants to cancel our rooms and rebook somewhere else without telling Amber, but I know that's just avoiding the problem. Another part wants to just suck it up, pay for everything, and get through the trip before setting boundaries afterward. Neither option feels right. I feel confused about my role in this family situation, and it seems like everyone else knows what to do. More updates to come as this situation unfolds, unfortunately. Now for the final update. Final update on the Great Wolf Lodge trip with my sister. Spoiler, it went horribly, but I finally found my backbone. Thank you all for your advice and support on my previous posts. I've reread your comments dozens of times in the past few weeks, trying to find the courage to stand up for myself. It's been 3 weeks since the Great Wolf Lodge disaster. Yep, calling it what it was. And I'm just now emotionally ready to write this all out. After my last post, I took everyone's advice and sent Amber a detailed email outlining exactly what I would cover: half her room cost and the water park passes, and what she would need to handle herself: food, souvenirs, arcade games, etc. I even attached screenshots of our text conversations where she had originally agreed to pay her own way before backtracking. I figured having everything in writing would prevent any misunderstandings at the resort. The night before the trip, as I was finishing packing for my family and running on fumes after picking up those extra shifts, my phone received a string of texts from Amber. She was asking if I could bring some extra spending money for her kids because they don't get opportunities like this very often, and it would break their hearts to watch their cousins playing arcade games if they couldn't join in. I managed to politely refuse, reminding her of our agreement. Her final message just said she would find a way to make it work, but that her children would be very disappointed. Classic Amber guilt trip. The drive to the resort the next morning was tense. My husband kept glancing at me with that "are you okay" look, and I was honestly dreading the whole weekend. We arrived about 20 minutes before Amber, which gave me time to check in and get our room keys. When Amber pulled up with her kids in the back seat, I forced a smile and helped them unload their luggage. Everything seemed fine upon arriving. The kids were all wide-eyed at the lodge's lobby, and even Amber seemed genuinely happy to be there. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I had overthought everything and this weekend would actually be the bonding experience I'd hoped for. Spoiler, I was very, very wrong. The problem started immediately at check-in. While getting her room key, Amber said to the front desk employee, "Oh, and my sister is covering all charges to both rooms, so you can just put everything on her card." I hadn't authorized this, and she knew it. I pulled her aside to a quiet corner of the lobby, trying to keep my voice low as I reminded her of our agreement. Her demeanor changed instantly. She raised her voice, saying I was embarrassing her in front of her children, and that I was just trying to prove how much better I was than them. People were starting to stare. Mortifying doesn't begin to cover how I felt. I noticed my kids watching with uncomfortable expressions, especially my 12-year-old, who was inching closer to me. My husband was distracting the younger ones, but they could all feel the tension. Amber announced loudly that her children wouldn't be able to eat at the restaurants or play any games because their aunt refuses to help family. I was about to respond when my 12-year-old stepped forward, opened her purse, and pulled out the $50 of birthday money she'd been saving for arcade games. "Aunt Amber," she said, holding out the money, "I want my cousins to have fun too. They can have this." I swear the entire lobby went silent. I felt pride at my daughter's selflessness and absolute fury that she felt she needed to sacrifice her birthday money because of an adult's manipulation. Even Amber looked momentarily ashamed as she reached for the money. Before she could take it, the resort manager approached and suggested we continue our discussion in a private office away from other guests. My husband took all 5 kids to check out the water park, while Amber and I followed the manager. Once in the office, I found myself calmly explaining the entire situation to the manager: our childhood separation, our recent reconnection, and the pattern of financial manipulation. I told Amber that I valued having her in my life, but couldn't continue enabling behavior that was harming my own family. Amber tried her usual tactics, bringing up our shared trauma and how I got to stay while she was sent away. But something happened. The manager, a woman in her mid-50s, interrupted and shared that she herself was adopted. She explained that while family support is important, creating unhealthy dependency isn't good for anyone involved, and that using childhood trauma as leverage in adult relationships prevents true healing. I could have hugged this woman, seriously. The conversation ended with Amber calling her adoptive parents, who apparently had no idea she was even on this trip, to send her money for the weekend. She refused to make eye contact with me as she left the office. The manager squeezed my shoulder and told me I'd done the right thing standing up for myself. I spent the next hour crying in our hotel room before pulling myself together. My husband and kids were waiting at the water park, and I refused to let Amber ruin their vacation too. The rest of the weekend was awkward when we occasionally crossed paths with Amber and her kids, but we mostly managed to avoid each other in the resort. The most heartbreaking part was watching the cousins picking up on the tension between the adults. My 12-year-old asked if they would still get to see their cousins after this weekend, and I honestly didn't know what to say. On the last day, as we were packing up, Amber's 7-year-old came to our room to say goodbye to my kids. He gave my daughter back her $50, saying his grandparents had sent them money and his mom told him to return it. That small act gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe Amber had reflected a bit on her behavior. We drove home in silence, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. That evening, I received a text from Amber that simply said, "I'm sorry for how things went. I need some time." I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I realized we both needed space to figure out what kind of relationship was actually possible between us. In the weeks since, I've started therapy to work through my guilt and establish healthier boundaries. Should have done this a year ago. My therapist helped me see that my willingness to be financially exploited wasn't actually helping Amber. It was just enabling unhealthy patterns and preventing us from building an authentic relationship. Amber and I haven't spoken since the trip, though her kids and mine still FaceTime occasionally. My mom is upset that we're not talking, but for the first time, I'm not letting her guilt trips affect me either. I've realized that real family relationships can't be built on financial transactions or obligation. They need mutual respect and boundaries. Edit. A lot of you asked about my relationship with Amber's adoptive parents. I reached out to them last week and we had a really good conversation. They've apparently been concerned about Amber's financial choices for years, but didn't know how to help. They thanked me for standing my ground and said it might be the wake-up call she needed. They also asked if they could take all the cousins out for a day together next month, which I think would be wonderful for the kids. This chapter of my life with Amber is nowhere near closed, but I've finally learned that I can love my sister without being her ATM. Thank you, Reddit, for helping me find my voice when I needed it most.